All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. We are very excited that you joined us. If you haven't tuned in, this is the show where we talk to celebrities, thought, and industry leaders to really discover their journey to success. I am super excited that you're joining us. This show is like no other. I can promise you that. You might laugh, you might cry, but you will definitely leave inspired and gain a whole new level of insight into those people that you follow, love, and admire. All right, welcome everybody to a very special, exciting episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. Very excited for this conversation with somebody who I've had a chance to get to know over the last 10 plus years, and now have a chance to do some work with as well too. He is in the sales world, and you don't have to say it, I can say it for you. He has become kind of the scientist of modern selling, the person who you look toward how do you think about the scientific and smart, repeatable ways to build and scale your organization. He's been a practitioner. He's been a lecturer. He's a 3-time varsity athlete. Let's make sure we don't forget that part. And for those of you who don't know, he's now managing partner at an amazing fund where I'm also an investor. So we have none other than Mr. Mark Roberge. Mark, thank you so much, man. I'm super excited for this conversation.
Yeah, damn, Jake, I got to take you around with me to all my webinars. That was awesome, dude.
That's good, man. Hey,
give me an ego.
We're gonna get into it, man. No, it's good. No, I got to tell you, man. I'll never forget the first time I heard you speak. We had a friend, Sean Black, and if you know Sean from Trulia and a bunch of other stuff, Sean's like, hey, there's Mark. Do you know Mark Roberge? I'm like, yeah, I think I've heard that name before. And this is it must have been like 2012, maybe before that.
Was it NYU?
You know, it was actually at, I want to say maybe it's a Bowery Capital event.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I was like, oh man, this guy. Your hair was a little shorter then, and I was like, wow, like I love it. It's like this is exactly how I think about it. It's a process. Like forget all this science stuff. So man,
I was just saying stuff that 50 other people are thinking. You know what I mean? Like it is what it is. But yeah,
that's cool. Right, exactly. Yeah, and you had the street cred, right? And I think that's such an important part of this of not just understanding the theory behind something, but also understanding the practical application. And I think sometimes in our sales world that in particular can kind of be either too polarizing one way or the other. And it's part of the reason even why I started Scaled was looking in the consulting world. It's either the big players, doing the theory or really tactical support, and thought that there was kind of this need for this in between. And so I think you've always been that guy to me that gets and understands where the ball is headed and also understands how to ground that in practicality. So there you
Thanks,
go.
Man.
Now you
Thanks,
really
man.
have to bring me
Yeah,
around.
exactly.
You can copy and paste this. So we're going to go back in time, man. So we're going to talk about really the journey here. And that's what we do on the podcast is we talk about what makes people, where they came from. We usually spend more time talking about random parts of their lives than we do the parts that everybody knows them for. So we're going to go back to, I'm going to nail it, Worcester off the 495. No, it probably wasn't.
Pretty much, man. Like,
not bad.
Anybody else who probably saw this, it doesn't grow. You probably know it as Worcester because that's how it's pronounced.
Worcester.
But yeah, it's properly pronounced Worcester, which is, I think, which I don't know how people. I think it's actually a UK city or multiple cities. So who knows how they pronounce that there? But yeah, in Massachusetts, we really pronounce it Worcester. Like I was Mark from Worcester. You just take the Pike, take 495 north off the Pike, and you find Worcester, and that's right.
All right, man. So you grew up there, then in Holden, from what I understand. So tell me, what was it like growing up in that part of Mass for you, man?
I don't know. Like it was interesting. There's not much. I think they've always been trying to get Worcester going. You know what I mean? And like it's always like Boston, and then there's like Providence and up here.
Right.
And so I would say like. I grew up in public schools in that area, and I guess I developed a knack for relating to people and almost like hiding my intelligence. I don't want to be cocky about it, but like I was smart in all through my schools that I went through, but I also hid it because I wanted to like fit in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I didn't necessarily run with like the high intellect crowd. And so I suppose that that probably developed an important fabric of something that led to opportunities that I held later, which is an ability to relate to a broad spectrum of people of many different attributes. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I guess that would be, one.
That's a big theme.
One aspect to it.
Yeah, we talked about that too in our conversation before. So, and you were the oldest too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my brother's 3 years younger than me. Yep.
Yeah, the younger brother. Had a grandfather who's a World War II vet. And so talk about maybe how that kind of shaped you.
Huge.
It sounds like you two were close.
Huge shapings from my grandfather. My family lived, it was my mom's dad and mom, and we actually lived above them. My grandfather owned a duplex. So the first 6 years of my life, we lived above him. So you can imagine I spent a lot of time with him. And he we were really close. He was kind of a semi-pro baseball player, loved baseball and loved the Red Sox, and got me into that. And we had all that going. And then, he was a World War II vet and served out in the New Guinea. He was actually MacArthur's. He kind of got some recognition. He ended up being General MacArthur's driver for quite some time. So he was, I think well respected out there. And then never went to college. It was the greatest generation, right? Just to come home and have a wife and kids and stuff that we just take for granted. That was heaven for them, and to have freedom. And he always gave me a lot of support, but also embedded a lot of humility in me, and also embedded a lot of the opposite of privilege, whatever that would be, to always really don't take for granted my education, because he never really had a shot at that. So that was a big deal for him, and something that I, at an early age, a motivator for me to make sure he sacrificed so much, and I didn't want to let him down with the opportunities that I have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was he was just, he was a janitor at a bank. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, he taught me a lot of really important values.
Yeah, it sounds like, I remember from our conversation, you went deeper there. And one of the things, as you kind of went into high school and you started to tease at it. So you played sports. What sports did you play in high school?
Yeah, it was soccer, tennis, and track. We were actually more of a soccer school than a football school, unlike a lot of schools. So we were the game that played Friday night under the lights that everyone bought tickets for.
Wow,
so that was really cool to play with that. And ran the mile and 2 mile in track.
That was gonna be my next. I also ran track. I was a hurdler.
Did you?
I was a hurdler. I was I was one place away from state my senior year in the 300 hurdles. So I was fast, but I wasn't fast enough to run the 400 or 200. Because I grew up in Kansas City, so we're competing against all the St. Louis schools and Kansas City schools, and I was fast enough, but because the super sprinters didn't want to do hurdles, so I was this can be my jam.
Yeah. It's the difference. Don't want to do it, but you've got the speed and the jump. Ever get back into it? Ever have a desire to coach it?
No, it's interesting. I basically kind of became our coach. It was really awesome. My freshman year, our head coach is actually an NFL wide receiver named JJ Burton.
Jeez.
And so JJ Burton was our coach. It was awesome. I mean, he taught us all how to do flips, all this stuff. And then once he left, he got traded to the Falcons. And I kind of became the de facto coach. So I feel there are opportunities that I could have taken, but no, I didn't do anything with it. Fastest mile time. What is Mark Roberge's fastest?
4:27.
2 mile time?
It was 10. I think it was 10 29 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So you're kind of fast.
Back in the day, 25 years ago. Yeah.
So that's pretty wild, man. But then you talked about that, right? So you're this athlete. Yeah. You're playing under the Friday night lights. You're running 420 miles. But you talked about this real briefly. You talked about hiding the smarts, right? And this ability and what that was like for you. So what was kind of high school like for you, in those settings? And how did you kind of satisfy both parts of your brain as you were going through that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly the grandfather influence was in there, and I think the parental influence was in there. They weren't like putting pressure on me, but it was just something I felt an obligation to my family as like, someone who's been given way more opportunity than any generation of my family before to like bring back good grades. So I just put a lot of pressure on myself there, but I didn't want it to define me, nor like, I wasn't necessarily a bookworm. Opportunity to check that box, but then I loved being athletic. I love being social. I mean, you're 19, you're 17 years old. You want to have like an attractive girlfriend and stuff. Like, you know what I mean? So like, I loved being, I loved my high school friends. We're still tight to this day, just a family. And I mean, it was like, and growing up in Holden, it was very woodsy. So we're talking like, 1.5 mile hikes with a flashlight into the woods for a keg party with 50 people. That was it wasn't city-ish. It was like flannel shirts and jeans and the Nirvana Pearl Jam age, and like hiking into the woods for a keg party and just, camping out or whatever. And it's mountainy out there. So that was my high school time.
I love it, dude. Well, plus you were the Mountaineers, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Mountaineers.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I was ironically the Mountaineer. I was the mascot. They just had one day for homecoming. They needed someone to dress up.
Yes.
And in a mountain and do a whole thing in front of the whole football crew on homecoming on the field. And I was in the band as well. So we played, we didn't have a marching band. We again, similar amount. We had our flannel shirts on and our baseball caps and and we'd play in the stands, play the pump up songs. Right. And so I was the Mountaineer my senior year.
Wow. So you're like the pep band, right? Or like prep, what do they call that? Like
I don't remember what you call it.
Basketball games. They had
you're not like in the marching, whatever. You're just like sitting there, just like in your flannel shirt and your baseball cap and your gym. And I played the trumpet, so I was jamming.
That's what I was going to ask next. The trumpet. So man, look at that. Three sport athlete, mascot, trumpet. Man, you were busy. And then let's talk about. So then you graduate, and I thought this is really interesting. You get accepted to MIT.
Yeah.
But you make the call to go to Lehigh, right? Yep. Lehigh's great school.
Yeah,
right?
Great school. Yep. But it's not on the MIT's level.
It's different, right? So again, going back to grandfather education, so important. You get this opportunity. I'm sure the family's like, oh my God, Mark got into MIT. I'm sure there's got to be some of that going down. So,
for sure.
So talk about that, man. Where were you at in your life, and what was kind of the main catalyst to think about, I've got this awesome opportunity to go to MIT, but Lehigh might actually be a better fit for me, because I think a lot of people would look at that and say like, wow, like why would you do that? Now you can go back to MIT later. We'll talk about that. But
sure.
What was that decision like? What was college like for you?
Yeah, it was really tough. I remember it was like June. I'd already gotten into Lehigh. I was really set on it. And then I got off the wait list at MIT and got in. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to MIT, of course. Like, and for 2 weeks, I was going to MIT and I wasn't sleeping. Like, I think trying to go back to being 17, 18 years old, thinking about college, like all of a sudden I couldn't wait for college to be done. And nothing against and that was like,
right.
That was like a complete, now that I know what undergrad at MIT is like, it was a totally wrong perception.
Sure.
MIT is like quite fun, and like being in Boston and all that kind of stuff. It was more of like the pressure. Yeah. I was like, damn, like I'm in all these AP classes and like I'm working my ass off. I'm under so much pressure and so, for my grandparents, for them, it was just college. I don't think they really understood MIT versus Lehigh.
Sure.
So my parents had a better perception of that. But that's really what it came down to. Is just like, you know what? Like, I just want to have a little more balance.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and who knows where I would have ended up if I went to MIT undergrad. But I will tell you that I do think that I came out of my undergrad decision a more well-rounded person, especially socially. You know what I mean? Like, because I ended up in, Lehigh is a very Greek school, and you can, like, most people are in a fraternity, and that comes with all these. A lot of folks went to private high school. I did not. So it's like, it comes with a certain amount of polish, I suppose, and a lot of rituals and all these things that I don't know if I wore a tie all that much before Lehigh. You know what I mean? Like little things like that. And so ended up in New York City later. I honestly think I was more prepared for the New York City general culture and professional culture coming from Lehigh that gave me a great educational foundation, but also social polish, personal skills. than maybe MIT would have given me. I'm not sure.
And it sounds like, was any of that intentional? Did any of you, I think maybe it's like your body being like intentional for you, right? Of like, hey, like this is going to be the right choice for us, like to do this, but to think about like, hey, the differences in experience.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly think like it's tough, man.
Yeah,
like,
at 18, 20, it's kind of
like
tough.
You could wrap it up to immaturity to some degree, like, but
maybe.
Also, who knows?
Maybe
it's not like I become Buddhist in my years, so I think there was something that had to happen there.
That's right. Subconsciously, you're being guided right toward this is going to do it. So then you get out of school and you graduate in mechanical engineering. Okay, why mechanical engineering? First of all,
that was suboptimal as well. Like, had I known where the world was going, computer science and computer engineering would have definitely gone the way. I mean, for on the surface, like I was really good at math, and like everyone told me since I was 12, like you have to be an engineer. And when they first told me the first 2 years, I thought it was someone that drove a train. Right? It's like, and then I finally figured out like what it actually is, and so then I just like that's what led me in that, and it was cool. Like I thought that was cool, and then like why mechanical? It was just the thing that came most easily to me. Like in the beginning you get exposed to chemical and material and electrical and computer and the physics aspect of it, and the mechanical aspect just like resonated and came to me. And I honestly, I think I would have been better off if I did computer science, knowing the path that I went as well as where the world was going. But regardless, that any type of engineering, curriculum gives you a mindset, and you can see so much of it, even the mechanical engineering.
That's right.
Like pedagogy coming out in some of the stuff I read about today, inputs and outputs. That's all like thermodynamics and heat transfer and all this shit. That's just like, it's there's a perfect analog to like marketing SLAs. I mean, it's like, so that's why I ended up in that arena.
All right. So you do that. And then you go like the kind of corporate, like great route. You get this job with Accenture, right? Yeah. So coming out of college, getting a job with Accenture, I think that most people would be like, yes, like this is great. And you had, I think you talked about kind of how you become more Buddhist, and I as I've kind of looked at your career, getting to know you, and this was such a crazy experience for you. So talk a little bit about, so you go to Accenture, which is this beast, right? You could have ended up in a lot of places. Talk a little bit about like what you got staffed on, and like, some of your experience, because you were there for 3 years, right? Yeah. Between 97 and 2000. Yeah. What was your experience at Accenture, and how do you feel like that kind of sets you on a path, potentially?
That was such a valuable experience. So transformational, all of them. But yeah, it was interesting because like the 97, I was actually an intern because I graduated in 98. So I was looking for something to do in the summer to like, get a real internship. And ironically, I was really going the mechanical engineering path. I interviewed with Pratt and Whitney in Maine to like build like space shuttles or something. I don't remember.
Right.
I think I interviewed with like someone in like Western Pennsylvania, and like, no offense, I think Lockheed Martin or something. And no offense to these opportunities. I mean, these are like some of the best companies in the world, and like people, like it would be an honor to go work there and all that kind of stuff. But like, I found them to be like working with old men in the woods. You know what I mean? Like it just wasn't exciting. And then like someone told me to check out Accenture, and they were basically accepting one intern from all the schools, like one from Lehigh, one from Princeton, one from Lafayette, one from Columbia, one from NYU. And I interviewed for it and I got it. And it was totally different. It was in New York City, and it was all like 20,
you got it, Mark?
25, 26 year olds.
Why?
I will tell you why, because like it was because of entrepreneurship. Before I even knew that entrepreneurship was a thing or what it was like there were plenty of students there that had good grades and all that kind of stuff. But I think the one thing came down was I had started my own club around bridging the gap between the academic stuff we were learning and real life practice in the community. And we would engage with the local municipalities to take on engineering projects to put to use some of the stuff we're learning that wasn't the whole field pedagogy wasn't as utilized. So I started this club, and that's what they were most attracted to was I think we've talked a little, Jake, is like entrepreneurship when we were in college was not a thing.
No.
Like no one was like, I'm going to start a company. There was no entrepreneurship center. It wasn't until the 99 bubble and bust where it became a more well understood fabric of our society. And so the fact that I actually started a club was profound to them. And they were just like, that is great. Plus they needed that balance between I guess first time making this connection all the way back to what I was talking about my high school experience, that combination of the intellectual rigor combined with the personable aspect, which you need at a place like Accenture, where they're going to staff you at a consulting company. You have to be able to engage the client, but also know what you're talking about. So I think that was the combination there.
Yeah, I love that. So, and you get staffed on a startup, right? Mm-hmm. You get staffed on.
Yeah.
Not this big you're not, a big company, like I think a lot of people that go to Accenture, they're a part of a big team, you get staffed on a startup.
Yeah, eventually. And that was transformational for me. So my internship, I was at UPS and I built the Find Your Package tracking system that we all use. I was part of the team that built that. We wrote that in C and some other crazy stuff. And then I went to G Capital when I joined the company, and we helped build the Home Depot credit card stuff and all that kind of stuff. And that was in I learned Java and those types of things. And then eventually Accenture had been ignoring the new economy, saying this is all going to die. And our relationships are with the big ones. And that's where we play. Right. And then eventually after 2 years, they're like, all right, maybe it won't die. So let's start staffing people on these startups. And then it died, 6 months later, right? So, but I got staffed on this company called Kana Communications up in Manchester, New Hampshire, which was a blast. And all of a sudden I felt like it was just like, I never looked back. It was just this is it.
This is it.
It's like everything about entrepreneurship, of the pace, the innovation, the change the world, the financial upside, it's just it was awesome. And then shortly thereafter, a couple of partners left to start a business. It was essentially, mobile was just starting to take out. This was 99, right? So mobile is very new. We barely have flip phones right now.
That's right. Motorola StarTAC.
Yeah, was probably that's what we had. We didn't have the BlackBerry
yet. The hot one, man. Yeah, that Motorola StarTAC, that black had a little antenna that came up.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And so they want to start an Accenture for mobile, just helping large companies embrace mobile technology as a consulting business. So I was hey, I want to do startups. Let's go do it. And we had no idea about we're so new as entrepreneurs. We had no idea that a consulting services business is a terrible business model. We raised money from Greylock.
Right.
We raised venture capital to start a consulting company. I mean, we've come so far in 21 years.
I love it.
But that's how people are thinking.
Yeah. And they came from Accenture. So people are all right, so there's probably some multiple that's going to be developed here. Okay. So you go to Vetro, right? Vetro was so you go to Vetro, you're an account executive. Yep. You're there for 4 years. And what was that work experience like? So you go in there, you're an account executive. Do you move into leadership?
I was all over the place. I started writing code. I started building, I did some stuff with voice technology and wrote voice XML apps and then they were I actually wasn't that great of a programmer. So I got moved. They were hey, we should really use you to manage these engagements. So I'd support the sales team, almost like a sales engineer with demos and stuff. And then once we closed the deal, I almost worked as what's today as a CSM and account manager in a way, right? That combination, a kind of an engagement manager. And so, when I jumped in, we probably had 20 people. A year later, with the .com rise, we had 150 people. And then with the bust, a year after that, we had 12 people. So I saw that whole, right?
Wow.
And so I still loved it. I was this is still awesome. I don't think this company is going to succeed, but I still love this. So I was you know what? I'm going to go apply to business school and solidify what better way to solidify my spot in the entrepreneur ecosystem than to try to get a top MBA. Yeah. So I applied to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and MIT, and I didn't get anywhere. No one accepted me.
No one. So then what'd you do?
So then I realized it's this isn't about having the great GMAT score and the great GPA. And walking in with hey, I'm a guy from New York that went to Accenture and did a Startman. They're you're a dime a dozen.
That's right.
So it was all about the uniqueness of the story. And I like started to really do some soul searching and why I really wanted entrepreneurship. And I started a nonprofit organization. So what happened was it called e-volunteers. So what happened was all of a sudden in the dot-com bust, there was a lot of people out of work that knew how to do HTML and programming and stuff. So I basically connected them with nonprofits that needed a basic website so that they can continue to brush up their skills and also meet people on the board of these nonprofits who also ran big companies and probably needed some talent. And so we did like 15 different, projects. There were like 25 of us, and it was cool. It ran for a while, and it solidified like a better, more crisp vision on what I wanted to do. And then the 2 years after that, or a year after that, I applied to Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Yale, and Dartmouth, and I got into MIT, Yale, and Dartmouth.
Love it. All right. So then you leave to go there. But before that, we talked a little bit about some other experiences in 2001. And I think it was for a lot of people that at that time you were living right across from the World Trade.
Yeah.
And you had more than firsthand experience into what happened. And, if you're comfortable with it, maybe just talk a little bit about, that experience, because obviously, you're still really early in your career. You're living in New York for the first time. You're so close to something like this that happened. Talk a little bit about, if you feel comfortable, just,
Sure.
how that experience, how that helped to kind of shape you or kind of cause you to think about things a little differently.
Yeah. It was another huge contributor to my own fabric now. Is you are right. I was living across the street from the World Trade Center in Battery Park in a place called Gateway Plaza. Literally you could throw a baseball and hit the Trade Center from my apartment. And so I was in the shower when the first plane hit and then didn't even know what was going on. And then the second plane hit, I was getting dressed and, you hear this explosion and you look out the window and like grown men in suits are running toward the water. And I think you always kind of have in the back of your head, living in Manhattan, that if someone's going to attack the US, that would be a great place to attack. It's just like There's a density of people and you're just thinking someone's dropping bombs and I got to get the hell out of here. So I threw on my running sneakers and ran down the stairs and almost thinking like I'm going to swim over to the Statue of Liberty if we're being bombed. And I look up and I like had to cover my eyes because literally glass was raining down. Right. And both the trade centers were like candles. And then I just like headed north and, the trade centers fell and, you really just it's really hard to grasp at that moment. Cause like normally when something like that happening, you're listening to the radio or watching TV and you have the context. Like Katie Couric is telling you that like the Pentagon's on fire and it was these planes. And it was like, I had no context. I thought someone shot missiles at them. I didn't know what happened. And then they fell down and all the faces of people that you knew that worked in there go through your head. And like, it's just crazy. And so, and it was weird because all for some reason the cell towers were jammed. So I couldn't get through to my girlfriend, my kid's mom, who, we ended up getting married. So her name was Robin. I was calling my parents, like, where can I, because she was living with me at the time. And I'm like, where can I connect with Robin? And finally, after like 2 hours, they were like, meet at Uncle Ray's apartment. And Robin had this uncle that lived on the Upper West Side. And he was a very famous Broadway actor. So he was like the lead in like Grease and Jesus Christ Superstar and like, very flamboyant. You can picture a Broadway actor, very flamboyant guy, right? And so I got there first before Robin got there. And I was like, he was like, Mark, come on in. And I was in shock. I was literally like, let's paint our faces and hide under a bush in Central Park. And he was like, what are you, crazy? And so then Robin showed up and then like 15 minutes later, the buzzer goes off. He's on the bottom apartment. And it's really tall, attractive woman. And it was Brooke Shields. And I was like, Uncle Ray was like, oh, Brooke's here. And it turns out he was really good friends with Brooke Shields, still is to this day. He sang at her and Andre Agassi's wedding. And they were like and so she got evacuated from the United Church. She was staying next to the United Nations. So she got evacuated. She had no place to go. So she came over. And now I'm like, Ray, I don't think I can handle this right now. Like I'm already in shock. And he's like, let's just go for a walk. So like Robin and Ray were walking, and I was like, Brooke Shields was the first person that I told my day about to, which was like crazy, like paparazzi or like taking pictures.
Yeah, of course.
But anyway, like it became, obviously that was a traumatic day. And then 6 months later, I like woke up and went to the city, and I couldn't think, or it was almost like my head was in a tank, and I felt like I was having a heart attack. And I went to the doctor, and they were like, yeah, you have post-traumatic stress disorder. Like this is like quintessential. We see it in the military a lot, and you had this experience, and like, gosh, man, I can't believe these military folks. All I did was watch this traumatic event happen. Imagine what they have to do every day. And like, and yeah, I had severe anxiety that caused me to not be able to work. And so I got medicated, and I went through therapy, and it created a tremendous amount of like vulnerability, and showed how invincible I was, and showed how quickly gifts that I took for granted were taken away overnight. And I had to work hard through that. And I still suffer from anxiety to this day. I had a major attack again 8 years ago. But ever since then, you know, I've taken medication, and I'm regularly in therapy, and it's raised my awareness about the stigma associated with it. And so any opportunity that I have, I try to leverage whatever platform I have to offset that stigma. I've had, you know, a lot of speeches that I give in front of large amounts of people. I explain that I'm in therapy and explain that I'm on medication, and I'm proud of it. And I think everyone should have a therapist, and no one should be shy away. And I've had lots of people reach out to me and say, I'm going through this as well, and I feel like I need to hide it. And thank you for being like talked about. Again, it's not a headline for my brand, but it is a big part of my personality.
No, it's you.
And you know, and that was just a big changing moment for me, and create a lot of like, you know, vulnerability, and is a fabric of who I am today.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, man. And I think there's a lot of people listening that will feel the same way, that will feel heard and seen, and you know, maybe even take a different outlook on themselves as they go through it. So I appreciate you sharing that. And, you know, we had talked before, and I just think it's such a powerful message to be able to share and help people to see that there's a lot of people that may be suffering, and that there's a path forward, and it's okay to talk about it. And we all, you know, different people need help in different ways, and there's no right or wrong associated with it.
Yeah, I think we're making a lot of progress.
I think so too.
The next generation coming up is,
I think so too,
much better wired for it.
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, it's much more of an encouraged versus like what's wrong with you. So all right. So you've had this experience. You then go to MIT. So then you live out you get there. So what was it like going to MIT? If you can spend a few minutes there, I think a lot of people are like, wow, like what's an MIT MBA
man.
like?
Unbelievable. I mean, just being at MIT, it's like, I remember thinking about the persona of like MIT is like, you know, and that's the same for any.
Yeah, of course.
Like, no one's bigger than that. There's no one that could go to MIT and be like, I'm bigger than the MIT brand. And it's just like you're embraced, and you feel this obligation to live up to the opportunity you've been given. And I was going in as an entrepreneur, right? So I started like 10 different businesses. I like went into the 100K business plan contest, and teamed up with some students from China and did some sort of like mobile delivery app. And then I teamed up with startups.
POSspot,
so
right?
that was the one that clicked. Was I was studying social networking, social media before it was a thing. Like Facebook didn't exist. It was like classmates.com and then MySpace. And I was like, we were all at the time like intrigued by the fact that like you could actually have a vibrant website without any work, like Web 2.0, like consumer generated content. This was all like a profound idea. And I was like, this is amazing. And so I particularly looked at the pet space, a $15 billion US market growing at like 15% a year, the humanization of pets, and like how much people hated putting their dog in a kennel. And wouldn't it be great if you could just find a neighbor to take care of your dog for you, as opposed to put in a kennel? And that hence, like, a sharing economy thing before, before Uber and that comes, and that exists today. I think is like, what is it, WAG or I don't know. There's a
I'm sure there's a version of it.
Yeah, there's a version that succeeded and executed better than me at a better time. And I raised $1 million between my 2 years at MIT to build that company and run it. Hired 5 engineers, had a blast. I didn't go through the recruiting process, ran it after school. I actually met Eduardo, who's the co-founder of Facebook. Like I was TA in a class at MIT on entrepreneurship, and one of my students came up like, "Oh, you should meet my boyfriend Eduardo. He's over at Harvard, and they're launching this other social networking company called Facebook." And so I went up to Harvard Yards and had beers with him, and he was talking to me about how like they were doing it at Facebook and they're about to launch American University. And I was like exchanging emails with Reid Hoffman because he was starting this thing called LinkedIn. Yeah. It was just like crazy, dude.
That's
like,
wild, dude.
And so I ran that after school. Dharmesh Shah, the co-founder of HubSpot, was one of my angel investors.
Got it. Okay.
That's how I got into HubSpot. Was
all right.
We had hit it off in school. We sat next to each other in class, and we took an entrepreneurship class together where we started a company. Mine was PawSpot, his was HubSpot. We would grab Chinese food every month, and he liked me. And he's like, "Listen, I made some money before school. I'll invest in PawSpot, but I need you to help me with HubSpot 1 day a week." And so that's how the journey started. Well, let's talk about it, man. Obviously HubSpot, 2007, 2014, big chunk of your, professional career at that stage. So obviously, look, there's a million different things to go into. What I'm most interested in is, maybe your evolution through the phases of growth, right? Because when you go from 1 to 450, right, and expanding revenue like 6,000%, there's all these phases of things that happen. And so, and I think that the other thing, Mark, that makes you unique is if you look at a typical it's really difficult to be a leader in marketing, sales, CS that makes it, kind of like the distance to the 7 years in particular. So talk about maybe just like your own experience, that kind of first phase of growth that like, oh my gosh, we're at, 5-10 million, right? Oh crap. Now we're at 50, now we're at 100. Like maybe just talk about kind of like a little bit about Mark in those stages and you in those stages and, your themes around kind of leveling up or preparing to where you could scale. Where a lot can't. Yeah, I think there's 2 themes. One that's very like replicable and one that's just dumb luck. And that is like, you have to remember that when I came into HubSpot and we were building the sales team, it was like profound that we were closing deals on the phone.
Right.
I mean, it was profound that we were having a lead come to an inside sales team and doing a go-to meeting and closing deals. Right. So I didn't know that we were on the verge of this enormous disruption in sales that would play to my strengths, right? So like, because every sales leader up until that point knew how to hire a good-looking male or female to show up at a client's office and do an in-person meeting to close $1 million deal. There was no blueprint on how to engage an inside sales team and what that meant. And what that took was like people who are much more data driven and process oriented. So everything I did up until that point, like unknowingly had prepared me for that. And by the way, there was no one in the world with 10 years experience in this motion. Right. So it was almost like I was at an advantage over the 20-year veteran from IBM or Oracle. Right. Because of that. So I just got lucky with that point of like this enormous disruption in the function that I was running. And then the other thing was I've always had a little bit of career ADHD. Like once I figure out a job, I get bored and want to move on to the next one. You sort of need that to take that journey, right? Because for the first 4 months, I was an account executive and I set up the CRM and I sold 100 deals and then the next 6 months, I was the first sales manager and I figured out how to hire reps and manage reps. And the next 9 months, I was a sales director who figured out how to build managers to be able to coach reps. And the next year, I was a VP of sales that understood how to devise like compensation plans and run multiple segments. And the next year or 2, I was a CRO who understood how to align sales with customer success and marketing. And you know what I mean? So it's just like, I was always like thinking ahead because I'd get bored. And that's critical because you can like, the more you scale, like if you're going from 1 to 5 and you don't anticipate something, usually you can hustle and make up for it. But when you're going from 20 to 50 and you miss something, you're fucked. Like if you miss like, oh shit, I'm gonna need more managers, or I'm gonna like need, like, you can't recover from it. You know, so the bigger you are, the more critical it is to be looking ahead 6 to 9 months. And there were two things that helped me with that. One is I had assembled a peer group of a dozen other heads of sales that were kind of like me, kind of like running a new age thing in their 30s, that type of thing. And I learned a ton because we grabbed dinner every quarter and just share problems.
Super
and I
smart,
learned a ton for like 8 years. Anyone could do that, whether you're an SDR or a CSM or a manager. Anyone could find peers from other companies. And it's nice when you don't have the political biases of someone at your company who could give you a raise or whatever. It's just like total safe space. And the other one is I found a great mentor in John McMahon, who was Halligan's old boss and at PTC. And he's now a legend, you know, having taken PTC from 100 million to $1 billion. He's on the board at Snowflake and MongoDB.
I know John.
Sumo Logic.
I met John at Glassdoor. Yeah, John
came out with a new book, by the way, last week. Just if you want to read an awesome book. Yeah. And he's just phenomenal. And we spent 4 hours a month together. And he was critical once we got to that 30, 40, 50 million to be challenging me with questions I wasn't asking, to be able to think that far ahead. You know. Yeah,
I had a chance to meet John, and I was. You know, I feel like that was one of the biggest fail points for me of why I, in my first kind of run, had trouble scaling, was that exact thing, that I didn't, like you said, if you realize what needs to happen when it needs to happen, or like within a month or two, it's already too late. And I think that if you look at the people who have built their career, it's thinking about what's going to get me in 18, you know, what are maybe some ideas of 18 months, but certainly what's going to get me in 6 months. And if you're not talking to people who've been there and done it, you know, your aim is going to, you know, have a much higher percentage of being off.
Well said.
Yeah. And John came in, and maybe I should have talked to them into letting John meet with me for 4 hours, 4 hours a month too. So then HubSpot's this amazing journey. You write the book, The Sales Acceleration Formula, kind of toward the end there, that really becomes, I think for a lot of sales leaders, before that, it was like Predictable Revenue. It was kind of like the first book that came out that was kind of sales blueprinty. But then you came in and you talked about like the interview process and hiring and all the different things and scorecards. And again, it's that mechanical engineering, I think, that through line of that process and systems thinking that, you know, kind of led to that book. And we'll wrap up talking about what you're up to now. But then you leave, right? You've been there for almost 10 years, right? Or I guess, almost what?
I think it was 9.
Yeah, 9. And then you go to, again, we talked about this in our conversation before that I thought was kind of interesting. I was like, and then you go to Harvard, right?
Yeah.
Or you do some other, these things. And you talked a lot about how a lot of these were like opportunities that, you didn't have an intention to go to Harvard or an intention to write a book. That it was kind of a reaction to opportunity. And how do you think, because again, you talk about think about kind of juxtaposing that with like the intentionality of thinking about thinking ahead, coupled with the serendipity of life, right? And so what was that decision like to go, you know what, I want to go to academia for a little bit, or I wanted to write a book right before that.
Yeah. It's, reflecting on the last 10 years of my career and the most important things that happened to me professionally, you're right. None of those were intended or planned. And so it's really altered my philosophy on life relative to the 25-year-old Mark. Because to your point, I came out of MIT thinking I was going to be a tech entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I had no intention to go into sales. And
you didn't think you're going to be a CRO. I've heard you talk about that before. Instead, you became a sales leader, which is for most people that engineering mindset is like the polar opposite. But that goes back, look at that theme, man, from high school to Lehigh. You had that social aspect, but you were also, and you've done a lot of things. I think you're able to see the patterns. And I feel like in sales so often in particular, it's almost like we're blind to the patterns, and maybe it's on purpose because there's job security when things don't appear to be patternistic. And I feel like, kind of think about those pieces well, of course you're going to be this kind of scaling CRO because you were able to think on both sides.
Yeah. But if anyone gets credit for it, it's Halligan and maybe a little David Skock. You know what I mean? It's because he was the one that was listen, I was involved in HubSpot because I was desperate for money as a new dad running a startup that was failing. So like that's how I ended up at HubSpot. That was supposed to be a 4-month landing place for me to get some financial security. And Halligan was just like, do sales, right? So he had the experience to know where sales was going and to know that I might be the new prototype. So he pushed me in that way to define who I became. And then like the book, right? The book, I'm not even good at writing. Like I would never, like writing a book sounds like hell to me. I didn't really like English growing up. And so like, but Jill Conrath, we had breakfast at Inbound one year and she was like, she heard my story and she's like, The Art and Science of Sales by Jill Conrath and Mark Roberge. She's like, I want to write this book together. And you can't tell a best-selling author no.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, she's like, I'm going to do a chapter. I'll do a chapter. We'll go to my publisher. We'll get this book done. And when I wrote the chapter, she's like, this is its own book. So that's how I ended up writing the book. And then when I wrote the book, I wanted to have a blurb from lots of different perspectives, including the academic experience perspective.
Yep.
And at the time I was being pulled in to guest lecturers in certain classes at MIT and Columbia and Harvard and Stanford and these different places, and had befriended one of the really famous marketing professors, Ben Shapiro over there. And I asked him, Ben, would you write a blurb for the book? And he's like, yeah, I have to read it first, but if it's good, I'll write it. And he read it and he's like, I'll write it. And I took him to lunch to thank him. And he said, listen, I've seen you teach. I've seen you write. There's a growing demand for entrepreneurship and faculty. Would you ever join the faculty at Harvard? And I was like, I mean, I didn't know it was an option. Like you didn't let me in as a student. You didn't let me in as a student.
Like just FYI. You didn't
yeah, exactly.
But I'm good enough to teach apparently.
Yeah, but it was just, perfect timing because I was ready to, take some time off. And it just felt like such a logical progression, even though it wasn't on my radar. And the same thing happened with the venture capital firm eventually too, which I never thought I'd be running a venture capital firm. So to your point, Jake, that is the learning for me. Is like you got a sense of who I was, this very planned person. Everything was a plan and don't get off the plan. But if I'd stayed with that, I would have never gone to HubSpot, done sales, written a book, gone to Harvard and became a venture capitalist. And those are all the best things that happened to me and also the biggest impacts I've been able to make on the world. And so I've become personally very Buddhist in my ways of responding to the signals around me. But my advice for my students and all those who are listening here is have your plan, like set your 1 year, 5 year, 10-year plan. But as various opportunities arise, take time to assess them and decide if you should alter the path. Because oftentimes the most important answers to your questions will arise when you're not asking the question. So that's really what kind of came to me through that reflection.
Yeah, write that down, right? When the answers come. The key, and I talk about this concept of opportunity comes in pieces, which is it's like you're doing all of these things. You have an idea directionally of the things, but then an opportunity comes and it's like, oh my God, I'm prepared for this. Exactly. That you don't know, like when you're doing those guest lecture spots, there was no you wanted to give back and it was probably fun for you, right? And there's so much of that serendipity and something similar happened when I was a career builder, then got the VP of sales job at Glassdoor, where they got my MBA and they'd positioned me to in an executive leadership program. Like I was a sales manager getting an MBA. Like what did I didn't need it.
No one was doing that. Right.
I didn't need it, but I was 2008, 2009, I'd already had certain years of experience. Let me kind of round out some of my own systems thinking and get outside of my little sales bubble. And holy shit, did it expose me to just these ways that these different people think. And I was very fortunate. And then that opportunity came up and I'd kind of done the things. I'd shown amazing enterprise sales ability, leadership ability. I had an MBA. It's and so when the opportunity came up, I was fortunate enough to be there, but it wasn't planned. It wasn't I'm going to do this and this, and then I'm going to be a VP of sales at a startup. I didn't even know what a startup was. I told this story the other day, Mark, you'll appreciate this. Imagine my first board meeting at Glassdoor, right? I'm sitting next to Bill Gurley, literally right next to me. Okay. Rich Barton from Expedia, Zillow. And there's a couple, then Neeraj from Battery and some others.
Yeah.
I didn't even know who Bill Gurley was. I had worked in corporate tech at Career Builder. I didn't know that I'm sitting next to these titans and things like, so it definitely was not intentional.
Yeah, for sure.
But
then
it all worked out.
Everything you'd done, all those weird decisions about the MBA and the salesman, it all contributed toward that role for you.
That's it. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of people. That's why I get, when people talk about their time, like, it's not that you shouldn't be smart with your time, but you should also leave room. You got to leave room to do those things that where you're not quite sure where they'll lead. And I think that's a great story. So as we wrap up here, let's talk a little bit about stage 2. Mm-hmm. We kind of got reintroduced that way. I'm an LP there as well. When I heard about it, I'd heard sales leaders in the past talking about it. And I actually had a chance to meet Jay before he started stage 2 too. And, a sales leader, Ryan Mang, hit me up. He's like, dude, Roberge, Mark's doing this thing. Jay's doing it. I was like, yeah, get me in. Like, please. I know I'm a consultant, right? And the consultant is like, oh God, here comes the consultant, right? And so I was able to kind of get involved. So what happened with stage 2, and maybe just talk about the kind of the future too. Yeah. I know you've got a book coming out around the science of scaling. We're going to drop a link for it so people can sign up. So take us through the last kind of 2 or 3 years. So now you're still lecturing, right? You're still lecturing at Harvard, but you're spending more of the MD energy at stage 2. So talk about that journey now, where you see sales going, the book, and let's wrap up in the next, as long as you've
fired away in 90 seconds. So however we do this, but while I was doing, one of the attractiveness to HBS was space to stay active in startups. And so I engage with a different startup every quarter for a day a week. And so I got introduced from mostly the venture capitalists that backed HubSpot. I was like, Mark, we need your help here. Mark, we need your help here. A lot of Series A companies. And I go in for a day a week and listen to sales calls, look at the funnel, talk to customers. And after about a month, I would come back to the board and management team with an assessment. Like, here's where you're doing really well. Here's where I'm worried. And here's how I'd recommend you mitigate those worries based on what I've seen other people do. And I did that with 4 years, 15 companies. There's bunch of unicorns in there. There's a bunch of bankrupt companies in there. And it was an ability for me to reflect on the patterns of what led to success. And I saw 2 glaring issues that I felt were contributing to a much higher failure rate than was necessary. And that is how these entrepreneurs and boards, when they decide to scale sales and how fast. I found a lot of entrepreneurs building a product and immediately setting a North Star metric for the organization on top line revenue growth. Mm-hmm. And I think it leads to failure, as opposed to if it was focused on customer retention and success. I saw a lot of boards and venture capitalists pushing a company to scale faster than they could because they had the successful investment 8 years ago. And that investment went from 1 to 3 to 10 to 30 to 100. And that became the sales triple, double. That became the plan.
That's right.
Versus what this company can actually do. So that's where the inspiration for the science of scaling framework came about was, can I devise a framework that entrepreneurs and boards can use to decide precisely using science when they should scale sales and how fast, based on the capabilities of your organization as opposed to some other irrelevant blueprint, right? So that's where the work was inspired. Back in 2017, it became a SaaStr speech, and it became a deck, and it became an ebook. And also I met Jay Poe, my co-founder at Stage 2, who was at Bessemer at the time, who was also agreed with the combination of VC and go-to-market and became a scholar of that. And after a few months of working together, came up with the idea for the first VC firm run and backed by sales, marketing, and customer success leaders. And, it's been a blast. 3 years later, 2 funds in, we have 210 LPs, including yourself and the president of Salesforce and SAP and the CRO of Zoom and Asana and Snowflake, and just unbelievable list of people that, I feel like I'm an organ player that gets to fly out to Scotland and play the oldest, most famous organ every day, and putting these people to work to help these next generation of young entrepreneurs. So
it's great, man.
The vision there is we feel like there's the VC entrepreneur partnership has been evolved and is excellent, but it's a little lacking on the go-to-market expertise. And that's the piece that we're looking to elevate the entire ecosystem with.
And that is why I trust you with
Nice.
the funds. I mean, look, Mark, we're so aligned here, man, and we could talk kind of sales and scaling, but I think that it's not only is this book going to be amazing, I think it's a much needed, I don't know if call it reality check, but maybe a little bit of reality check for how we think about growth and hyper growth. And the formula isn't always more bodies. The forecasted quota attainment does not equal the actual quota attainment. And we continue to build forecasts that way. So I, for one, cannot wait for it to drop. So like I said, we're going to drop a link for everyone you can download the first, how many pages? 30?
Yeah, it's a 40-page ebook
40?
right now.
Yeah, I love it.
This is how I write books is like, I aspire to have every chapter of my book be available somewhere digitally or in a webinar or something, because I like to practice it. And so if you download the book, send me your thoughts on LinkedIn. And that's how every week someone asks me some hard question that I hadn't thought about it. And that makes the book better.
I love that. Mark, again, thank you, my friend. Really appreciate you joining me. It was a really deep conversation. I hope a lot of people had some amazing takeaways. I know they will. So thank you again, Mark. Appreciate you.
You bet, Jake.
All right. Take care, man.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another extremely fun and interesting episode. I thought it was fun and interesting, so I hope you did too, of the Jake Dunlap Show. Really great, just breaking down everything that makes people who they are, the success, the trials and errors, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, and make sure, more than anything, to go over to jakedunlap.com. That's where you're going to stay up to date on all the latest guests, additional details, prep notes. We're going to be sharing everything on jakedunlap.com. So go ahead, go over there. You can subscribe there as well too, and we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show.